move this one. But, thank you for coming. All right, so my name is AJ Coleman. I'll be speaking here today, but before we get started, I like to have a little game. Each of you have a Rubik's Cube. If you haven't unwrapped it, please do. And for the garbage, I'm not responsible for it. For those of you at home, we can always send you a Rubik's Cube. All right. The first thing you notice on a Rubik's Cube, all the colors are perfectly aligned together, right? It comes out of the box, much like when we are born, we come out of the box, so to speak. But if life goes on, we go through different areas of life, whether it's grief, whether it's happiness and joy. So each of us have a Rubik's Cube. I want you to each think of a favorite number 1 through 10 and turn your Rubik's Cube that number of times. Flip it and turn it. Don't look at it. Just keep flipping it and turning it. If you've gone to Israel, how many times have you gone? Flip and turn it. If you have children, how many children? Flip it and turn it. Grandchildren.
Wait, you're going too fast.
That's got a lot of grandchildren.
72.
And how many times have you gone to a Kayan Center in the last 4 months? Flip it and turn it.
Just today, guys.
All right. Everybody take a look. Each one of you, the colors are scrambled, and there should be no Rubik's Cube look alike, which means we're all different. And how we process grief is also different. And what I'm speaking today is a little about grief, how to overcome, and to share some insights into my life. So as we fidget with our toys to keep our mind distracted from grief, it's a nice little thing to have to keep you in perspective. So I'm AJ Coleman. I was a widower at the age of 33. I raised my daughter from the age of 1 all the way to 9 before I had gotten remarried to Tracy. And I have spent a lot of time talking about my journey and how I became a widower, single father to a married man, and how I was able to overcome some of the challenges that I faced on a day-to-day basis. And tonight, what we're going to talk about is some of those success stories and secrets that we have, how you can overcome any type of grief. And when we think about grief, most of us equate it with the loss of a loved one or a pet. But grief is just much more than that. It could be a loss of a toy, it could be loss of a job, a car, or something materialistic, or even when your child goes away to college for the first time, you grieving that loss because why? That physical void is not there. And a lot of times grief is based on that physical void. You can't talk to that person, you can't see them, you can't touch them. And in turn, we mourn for that loss. I'm here today to tell you is, instead of mourning that loss, you to celebrate their life. And by celebrating their life, you can start transforming grief into memory, into legacy, into really passion. You're gonna wrap it, turn it as many times as you can. So one of the areas when we look at grief, a lot of us look at and say, how long do we grieve for? There is no timetable that has been given blueprint. I'm here to tell you that that's okay. You can grieve as long as you need to, but you have to look and say to yourself, well, what happened? Did I lose my job? Did I lose my pet? Child going to college. People once said to me, AJ, when you lose a child and they go to college, it's really different. And I sympathize with that. But what I've also learned is going through what I've gone through. My first wife passed away. I can no longer talk to her. I can no longer speak to her, touch her, really feel that joy and share memories that we once had together. Our daughter, who was 1 year old when she passed, has no physical memory of her mother other than videos, stories. When people say I'm going to leave my child to college, so you can still talk to them. You can still have a conversation. In some cases, they'll pick up the phone when you call, maybe FaceTime,
Usually say text me.
but they're there. And it's a whole different dynamic of grief process when you start equating different types. Grief today is more about what's lost and how you overcome, how you shift your mentality. And you have different types of questions you have to ask yourself is, how long do I mourn for? And those people will always tell you, especially during a Shiva, during any type of grieving session, well, you should only mourn for this long, or this is the only thing that you should be doing. And people are judging you on a day-to-day basis on your mourning process. And that's hard because we're all in the same boats thinking about how we want to grieve and they're grieving for you. But it's more difficult to process that grief, and you have to start learning how to move forward into that. And you also have to look at how is the grief that you're experiencing, is that different if it was a loved one, a toy, a job, or even another tangible possession. And as we continue to fidget with our toys and we continue to turn, what you're doing is you're taking any stress, anxiety, and grief that you have in your life, and you're turning it around subconsciously. And you may not even realize what you're doing. If we sit here today, including myself, we keep changing the algorithm of this Rubik's Cube. And this what helps us put things into perspective of how you go through that mourning process. And the hardest thing that I've said is the mourning isn't about why, it's about how you move forward. And mourning is about staying in the why aspects of that period. Why did this happen? Why me? Why couldn't this happen to somebody else? And once you start transitioning from the why to where am I going? Where are we going? Where can I go? You'll find yourself transitioning out of that mourning aspect, that grief period. Because instead you're thinking optimistic, you're thinking like positive, you're moving forward. Some people may equate it with the why and how principle. How am I going to get there? How am I going to do this? But I wrote a book called Keep Those Feet Moving. And I equate the where is the direction of travel. Where are you going? Where am I going to find my solution on where to go and get help? And there are ways you can get help from different avenues. Support from family, friends, medical profession. But if you go and talk to a family member, you go and talk to a medical professional, or even just in general, there's one element that is the same in every situation. And that's you. You're in the same exact position. And no matter how many times you talk about the same subject, people are going to listen, they're going to offer you advice, but they don't really know what it's like to be in your shoes. They could say it, but do they really understand where you're going? And I think when you look back at that mourning process, again, it's not how you go about it, it's where. is moving forward, moving to the next phase in your life. And talking to those people, everybody will have an opinion, but it's up to you as an individual to find deep down is how you want to grow and how you want to move on. Some people might argue that perhaps you don't have the necessary tool, or I don't know how to move forward. And that's where the beauty is. You have to look deep in yourself and decide what it is that you want to accomplish in life. And what do you want to do to keep that legacy of your loved one? And most times when I think about legacy, you think about the stories that you share. But a lot of that's more about laughter. It's about some of the memories and just sitting around. And the more that you share, the more laughter, and the more things that you come together from, that's where you're starting to really celebrating the life of the individual. And I firmly believe the way you grieve and move through that process is to transition your mindset into celebrating the life of the loved. So how do you celebrate when you're in pain? And that's a tough question that many people ask. There is no blueprint. There isn't a book that you can just read and it's just a blanket for everything. And that's why we continue to turn Rubik's Cube as we think things through. Because there is nothing. There is no way we can solve this instantaneously. We can look around, we can get some help and support, maybe watch videos, but at the end of the day, it's up to you to solve it. And to move forward in life, and to move forward in that grief, you have to decide how you want to cherish that legacy that is left behind. Or if you have a job and you lost your job, that's still grief. How do you go get another one? How do you improve? And it's all based on that mindset and how we navigate through our own life. And the question becomes, at what point do you let go? And the answer is you never really let go when you're in grief. What I have learned is I keep the memory, I talk about it. I wrote a book trying to air out my feelings about what it's like as a young widow at the age of 33. How do you navigate through some of these challenges? And I may have moved on in life, but it's not that I let go. I still cherish these moments. Tracy and I, we do celebrate Corey's passing, her first wife. She understands how important it is. I will tell you, it has been challenging at times. I will tell you, I sometimes get the two of them mixed up, especially when I call them sometimes. I'll be like, oh, sorry, Tracy, not Corey. Even when I wrote this book, I actually had the wrong anniversary date for her and I. I was thinking of the first one, we're interchanging different things. And it's a thing that we do. It's a point that we start to let go. And we start realizing that some of the humor is behind it. And we're thinking like, how did this happen? Many people have asked, how do you talk about it? And the answer is simple. And I'll take you back to where this all began. So when my wife was in hospital, she was diagnosed with brain cancer. And the doctor had given her a life expectancy of 1 to 2 years. I cried for about a minute or two, and then I said, you know what, we're gonna beat this thing. I don't know and care what the doctors say, we're gonna give her every fighting chance that we have. As the days went through, she came out of the surgery and she spoke Spanish to the Spanish teacher. I didn't speak Spanish. How am I gonna communicate with her? And that's what I learned, that the second language is in a different lobe of the brain than the front lobe where the cancer was sitting. So I had to learn very quickly how to speak Spanish and get her into the rehabilitation program. They told me that she would never walk or move, mobility. Through a rigorous program, we worked hard and she was able to walk again. Maybe with a limp, but she was able. But more importantly, she learned through occupational therapy how to thrive in life, understanding that her longevity was still a question. She learned how to change our daughter's diaper with one hand. I can barely change her diaper in two. And I look back and marvel, like, how can somebody in her state just function so well? We never talked about the unknown because I chose not to accept it. I've always believed that we were going to beat this. But as the days went by, the months went by, we had our ups and downs. It wasn't until February of 2009 where we've noticed a little bit of a deterioration. At that point, the doctors have told us that medical, it wasn't going to work. We're going to have to do the chemo, we're going to do the radiation. It was start to prepare. I still don't accept it. At the time, we were living with my in-laws, her parents, because I needed help raising a baby, and I needed help with my job, as well as taking care of my spouse. I moved us out of her parents' house about a month or two later, because I needed a place to go where I could think. And if any of you have ever lived with your in-laws, sometimes you need a own place to think. And they mean well, but in tough situations, especially when everybody's grieving, even though she hasn't passed, the grief does stop. We moved out, and then it was May of 2009. I get a phone call at work. It was from my wife telling me the kid is walking. We've been waiting for our daughter to walk for months. And I was excited, but then I thought about it when she said the kid is walking. I don't know if she couldn't remember her daughter's name, or it was just easier to say kid. But that's when I also realized maybe the end is coming closer. Because everything in life has a purpose. We may not understand, why things happen. Again, going back to the why aspect, we're in the mourning phase. A week later, she was admitted to the hospital one final time. I did not know that it would be the end. And something told me that Saturday afternoon to bring our daughter to the hospital. I didn't think it was a goodbye. I just think maybe it would cheer her up. The last image my wife had was our daughter on her bed, falling up, and my wife giving her a kiss. Picked up my daughter and waved. The wife went to sleep. 2 days later, she passed away. And I take comfort knowing, sharing this story, that I have done everything I could for her, to give her a storybook ending. Seeing the last image that she had wasn't me, it wasn't the doctor, it wasn't anything, it was her daughter. That's how she wanted to go. So at what point do you start letting go? I start realizing I gave her that storybook ending. I couldn't have written it any better. That's where I find comfort every day, sharing how the end happened. And a lot of people may say, well, you got lucky, you got blessed. Maybe we did, but I really do believe that there are certain elements in life that help propel us together. And when you talk about grief, we also talk about loss of spirituality and religion, such as something that I went through as well. I was angry after my wife had passed. I didn't know what to turn to. All of my prayers, Hashem, went unanswered. I didn't understand why. And I was upset. I said, well, maybe Judaism isn't for me. And I walked away. But part of letting go is realizing it has to be me that has to take that step forward and move. And when I walked away from my religion, it wasn't until 2016, 7 years later, where I met Rabbi Began through Tracy at Rabbi Began's house for one Shabbat. And he challenged me, just listening. And he asked me a question, who do you want to be? Who are you? And many of you probably have had him ask that same question to you. And I really did not know how to answer that. But I started to resonate with this preach, this teaching and challenging me to take those steps forward to embrace, to the point where I wasn't sure I wanted to get married at the time. And Tracy and I were just dating, and talking to him helped me understand where my principle in life is and taking those steps forward to keep moving further. He took me to Israel in 2017 with some of these guys that we have here tonight. I didn't know what to think about them when I first met. I was 40 years old. What am I doing going on a men's trip with a bunch of guys I don't know? And how comfortable was I? I'm still in that process. I had just gotten married to Tracy a year earlier. And as Rabbi talked to me a little about what to expect, I still don't believe. But once you got to Israel, I started seeing a little glimpse of religion aspects coming back. And it wasn't until we climbed the Masada. I don't know if any of you have climbed the Masada. It's pretty tough, especially after a night of drinking the night before. But you know, we had 2 water bottles, and I was done with both my water bottles before I reached halfway up. It was scorching heat, and I just was burning with sensation, and I didn't know what that was. And it wasn't until I started getting hotter and hotter, climbing slowly, got lost in the pack of people, that I started to realize that my faith was starting to be restored back into me. And realizing that everything that I had gone through in my lifetime with my grief has gotten to me where I am today. And as I continued to ascend the Masada, and I started looking up, because then it starts getting steeper and steeper, and you start questioning whether it might be easier to turn yourself around and get walked back down. But I kept at it. I kept pushing, not only for myself, but I started thinking about my daughter. I started thinking about Corey and all the toughness that we've had to endure over time. And when we made it to the top, celebrated with Larry over there, with you both, and I pushed each other. And when we got to the top and we had our mitzvah, started coming together, all the faith, all the things that I walked away with all those years started coming back inside. I started feeling something. And I didn't really understand it until 2 days later, we went to the hotel. And I prayed to Hashem. I asked specifically something very special and near and dear to me. What did I ask for? I asked him for him to give me a new job. I didn't like the job I was in. Said, please help me. 1 week after returning back from Israel, I got a call. A new job was waiting for me. A much better job than where I was. And what I'm sharing about this is part of where we go back to that grief period and how we mourn through our stages of life. We never know where we're going. We never understand what our defined purpose is in life. And sometimes we still question that. But sometimes it's better just to go with the flow. Trust Hashem to lead us through. I've learned through all those years of praying, I didn't pray well. I was asking. I was pleading. In some case, I was bartered. If you do this, I'll do this. And that doesn't work. And what I learned in Israel with these guys, and with Rabbi Began, praise works. If you praise Hashem, and you work through and you start to let go of the anger, you start to let go of some of those emotions, good things do happen. And I look back at my life a couple of years later to where I am today, and having the blessing to come here today to kind of share my story a little bit. It never would have happened if I still held on to that why aspect in that brief period. I chose to go where? Kept moving my feet, no matter how many times that I got rejected and how many times I got stuck. There has to be things alive within each and every one of you to move forward whenever you had some sort of roadblock, grief, or something that's troubling. You can talk about it all you want. You can pray. In the end, it's all about you. And that's where the hard part comes into. How do you have those tools for success? I am not a professional medical, but counseling does work. There are people out there that are dedicated to helping people get to that where. There are other aspects, friends, family, leaders that you can turn to help you with those kind of things. As we look at our Rubik's Cube, and we're still playing with them, as we go through, and some of you are smiling, because you know I'm right. You notice how your colors keep changing over and over again. The homework, the hard part for each and every one of us is going to figure out how today, tomorrow, next week, put each and every one of these colors back together and how we found it today. Many of you are going to give up, toss it aside, maybe you leave it here, that's okay. But again, where your journey takes you is how you start putting this back together. A simple child's toy can really mean something in life. And that's where we have purposes. And we were meant to go through certain things. Instead of questioning, celebrate them. I know there's a bigger plan out there. We may not like it, but there is something better out there that is waiting behind us. That's something that I've learned. It took a long time. But as I wrote my book, I went deep. I've never shared or talked about a lot of my thoughts that I've shared with you today. And who's going to listen? Look at me and say, okay, well, what does he know? I was 33 years old. I didn't have a clue what I was doing in life. Raising a daughter. You know, you go to these functions and sometimes you're the only dad there. Especially birthday parties, listening to gossip. And it's not a place that I prefer to be at because I don't understand all the women's gossip that was taking place. But I was there for my daughter. And she knew that she was the most important part. And through all this grief, I had to remain strong. Not for me, but for her. And as we talk today still, the anniversary of her passing is coming up next month. My daughter and I, we talk about it. She understands where her mother went. We use different words in our house. We say mommy had an illness. She wasn't sick, she had an illness. So whenever she hears the word that she's sick, she thinks she's got like a cold, but not serious like word. These are part of these grief techniques that I have learned over time to help me continue to move forward and to keep those people.
Who gave you this idea? Did you come up with this on your own?
Yeah, it's my book. But yeah, the whole point is that we have to solve our own problems, really. And a lot of times it's easier to give this to somebody else and say, you solve it. But there's a point in time that there are 16 on this side, right? They represent religion, spirituality, faith, finance, health, relationships. Of course, it could be anything you want. It can be even just for your children or grandchildren and how you put them back together. But the idea is, with your mindset, we think one-dimensional a lot. But when you start putting things back together and you start focusing on the bigger picture, that's where the healing begins, I believe. Well, the Rubik's Cube, it's just an analogy, you know, a toy. I spent my entire life using analogy to help explain things. It helps me articulate out, but also helps me resonate with the audience a little bit better. If you ask my daughter, she doesn't like it because she thinks I'm always making something bigger than it should be. Tracy might agree too. You can solve a problem.
No.
AJ. So who inspired you to do the book?
So I initially wrote it as a memoir for my daughter, thinking that she can see and understand who I was and how all the things that I went through with her mother up until the end, things that we never talked about. Then I started talking about it, different people, Tracy, one of my buddies, business partner in some area, said, gotta get this out here. There are not enough men that are 33, 34 years old that have a story like yours. And the book is about everything that I've gone through, like whether it's the loss of a job, whether it's the anxiety, whether it's the disability, loss of faith, loss of just companionship. And the idea was, just give it to my daughter. But it just started getting notoriety, people started talking, saying, AJ, get out there. Put yourself out there. I had to learn very quickly to become uncomfortable and get comfortable very quickly. But it was a book that, I wanted to write. Those years in grammar school, high school, to teach you how to write, but they don't teach you how to write a book. They really don't. I mean, it was like, really had to get deep involved. And there are things that I kept to myself all these years. They told me, you want it out there, you got to put it out there. And this was also a book that turned out to be a therapeutic thing for myself, where I look back and say, gosh, how did I overcome this on my own? But the secret is, I had support, I had love, and I'm still learning. Even though my wife has passed, I celebrate her life every day. And I create the legacy. And that's what this book is about, that her legacy is left behind for those who want to be. It's our legacy. So,
Who was your favorite person on your Israel trip? That's the name you can't say rabbi.
I was saying, Rabbi David.
that's a tough question.
Person
I
has
know
to
you're gonna
be.
say Steve.
No.
I think all the
Person
guys
has to
over
be
here
in this
today.
world.
No, I mean,
You, Rob.
for those of
I
you,
knew that. I just wanted to hear it.
for those of you gone to Israel with Rabbi Vegan or maybe with Rabbi Gotti, it's really an amazing bond that men have together. And especially when none of us, well, some of us knew each other. I knew nobody. I mean, and today, almost 6 years out, I mean, we're still close. We're probably about 11 of us, 16 that still get together. We talk, we cry, we make fun of each other.
One didn't make it back from Israel, but we're not going to talk about it.
Yeah,
Where is Howard?
but then, so this is what it's all about, coming to a Kaim Center, just being a part of community, being a part of really special group of people who understand who we are and think about how far we have come over those years. And I have to say, I thinking today on my way over, been coming here for 7 years. Where'd time go? And how much have I grown in those 7 years?
Your daughter's 17 now?
On a good day. She's 15.
Good.
Yeah, so with
Thanks.
Zoe, so I'm with two other daughters, stepdaughters, we have a blended family. And I learned very quickly when Tracy and her children moved in that I can't solve all their problems. I have to learn to listen. And that was another good challenge, and I still. She's smiling because I don't always listen to all of it. I don't know when to listen and when to inject my thoughts with all three levels. Sometimes I'm supposed to just listen. And I always want to like solve their problem. I want to solve their Rubik's cubes, but I can't. But yeah,
How old
Zoe,
are they?
Zoe is 15.
The twins are 18, they're freshmen in college.
What words from friends at that time were the most helpful for you?
It's a good question. At the time after she passed, it was actually, somebody once told me, you want to be right or you want to be happy? And I know, it sounds like a weird thing to say after somebody had gone. But I started thinking, my entire life, I always wanted to be right. Proving people wrong, doing this. But I wanted to be happy. And I didn't know how to be happy, but I knew that was where I wanted to go. Other advice that I had really gotten that resonated is that in life, don't put a question mark where there's a period. Sometimes, again, we don't understand what happened and why. Maybe it's Hashem saying, I'm closing this chapter. Don't question me. You're moving on to something different. And we all believe that we have a defined purpose in life. When our purpose is up, that's when we go home. And it was time for my wife to go home. And I think back at the timing of all this, our daughter was 2 months old when her mother was diagnosed with cancer. She conceived, my wife, very quickly into our process that we were planning for a family. If we had waited 2 more months, 3 more months, our daughter wouldn't be here today. So putting a question where there's a period is something else that I started to, over time, learn the importance of what that communication was. But again, people are always going to tell you things, they're always going to give you advice, they're always going to tell you what you think it is. But at the end of the day, you have to decide what's best for you and how you want to move forward. And when you're stuck, as long as you keep those feet moving, you're going to go somewhere. And that's kind of the mindset that I've developed and encourage others to follow. Thank you.
Yeah, that's great, thank you. Yes.
Does anybody want a book?
Yeah, if
Yes.
anybody wants a book, go ahead and go over there.
Thank you very much, AJ.
Well, thank you very much for having still learning this. They don't teach you this in school.
AJ, your picture of Schindler. Yes.
Oh, yeah, good idea. Want to take a picture? With the-
Stop.
I did.
No, we walked up early.
I should tell you how to solve it. I still don't understand. Yeah, I still don't understand. We had a good time.
Hey, Janet.
Oh, people do it in like 10 seconds. Why would one of them lose Andrew? He's still there. Look close. It's been perfect.